It all started with a verdict. One ruling, one moment in a crowded courtroom sent shockwaves not just through the lives of a broken family, but across the entire nation. Cameras were rolling. Reporters packed every corner of the room. Protesters waited outside, holding signs that screamed for justice. And millions of viewers tuned in online as the judge read the final decision. Before we get into the full details of how one divorce case ignited a firestorm of public outrage, let me welcome you to the Verdict Diaries. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss these real-life inspired courtroom sagas, emotional battles, and unbelievable legal twists. We bring you stories every day that reveal how justice, love, betrayal, and law intersect. Now let's go back to where it all began. Rachel and Mark Hamilton were once America's favorite power couple. He was a decorated military veteran turned motivational speaker. She was a successful entrepreneur who built a skincare empire from scratch. With 2 children, matching charitable foundations, and countless magazine features, they were the picture of unity and success. But behind closed doors, things had started to unravel years earlier. The court documents were sealed at first. Most people assumed it would be a clean split, mutual, private, respectful. But then Mark filed a motion challenging the validity of their prenup. Rachel's lawyers responded with counterclaims of financial abuse and emotional manipulation. It got uglier. Secret recordings surfaced. Private investigators were hired. Allegations of infidelity, hidden accounts, and even tampering with joint business ventures poured into the media. Every week brought a new headline. The press named it the divorce trial of the century. At the heart of it all was one issue: custody of their 12-year-old daughter, Lily. While both parties claimed to want what was best for her, the courtroom footage revealed something else: a battle for control, legacy, and public perception. Rachel claimed that Mark had emotionally neglected Lily, traveling too often and undermining her parenting. Mark insisted Rachel was manipulative and used their daughter to punish him. Social media exploded with opinion. Team Rachel and Stand With Mark trended on Twitter. TikTokers posted breakdowns of court footage. Reddit threads dissected each lawyer's argument. Legal experts weighed in on morning news shows. Then came the moment that lit the fuse. Mark's attorney submitted a surprise motion days before the verdict. They demanded full custody on the grounds that Rachel had concealed a prior mental health diagnosis from the court. The room fell silent. Even the judge appeared momentarily stunned. Rachel's response was swift but composed. She admitted to having suffered from postpartum depression years ago, but argued she had received treatment and had never hidden it, only that it was irrelevant to the case. Her supporters called the tactic misogynistic and cruel. Mark's followers said it proved she was unstable. The courtroom atmosphere grew more hostile. Spectators lined up for hours to get in. When the final day of the trial arrived, the courthouse was surrounded by protesters on both sides. Security had been doubled. Police set up barricades. Someone even brought a megaphone chanting, "Justice for Lily." The judge, a seasoned woman with 30 years on the bench, began her verdict. She awarded full custody to Mark, citing inconsistencies in Rachel's testimony, concerns about her emotional well-being, and an assessment by a court-appointed psychologist. While Rachel would have generous visitation, the decision was clear. The internet exploded. The hashtags changed. Justice for Rachel, down with the system, and custody crisis took over. Rallies formed in major cities. Women's rights organizations released statements condemning the ruling. Petitions to review the judge's decision gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Even celebrities posted about it. But here's where it got truly unprecedented. Law students at a major university staged a week-long sit-in. A prominent civil rights attorney called for a public inquiry. One state senator tweeted that it was time to reevaluate how family courts treat women. News outlets around the world picked it up. And Rachel, she didn't give any interviews, not at first, but she did issue a statement through her lawyer. This verdict doesn't just affect me. It affects every woman who's ever been told she isn't enough. I will appeal. And with that, what began as a private dissolution of marriage became a national conversation about justice, gender, mental health, and the custody system. The protests outside the courthouse hadn't subsided. In fact, they had only grown louder. News vans lined the street, capturing footage of furious demonstrators holding signs that read, "Justice for Ava and system failed her." The nation had watched with bated breath, expecting a verdict that would set a precedent, one that would reflect justice for women wronged in silence. Instead, what came was a shockwave that reverberated far beyond the courtroom. Inside, Ava sat with her hands clenched in her lap. Her lawyer, Linda Cheng, stood motionless, eyes still locked on the judge's bench, where just moments ago the final verdict had been delivered. Noah, her ex-husband, avoided all eye contact. The smirk he once wore had disappeared, replaced by the stiff posture of someone whose mask had cracked, revealing the truth that too many already suspected. The verdict? The court upheld the prenuptial agreement in full, awarding Ava only a small monthly support, and custody of their child was to be shared, despite the documented evidence of emotional manipulation and abandonment. The backlash was immediate. Social media erupted, legal analysts debated the loopholes, and feminist activists mobilized nationwide. But Ava didn't cry. Not anymore. She had shed enough tears during the trial. Instead, she stood outside the courtroom steps, stared into the cameras, and gave a single statement. "I may not have won today, but I refuse to stay silent." This isn't the end. That night, the hashtag #, Justice for Ava, trended globally. Her story had touched something raw. It had exposed a fault line in the legal system, one that too often failed women caught in the intricate webs of emotional abuse, financial dependency, and legal technicalities. Legal experts began analyzing the verdict in detail. It turned out that the prenuptial agreement Noah had insisted on included specific language that limited Ava's access to marital assets. Assets she had helped build through her labor, her support, and her sacrifices. The prenup was signed weeks before their wedding, under the guise of trust and love, but now it was evident that it had been crafted with precision and cold foresight. To make matters worse, it was revealed that Noah's legal team had strategically delayed discovery, limiting what Ava's team could access before trial. Important digital records, hidden bank accounts, and incriminating texts were excluded from proceedings due to technical complications. But it wasn't just about money. It was about acknowledgement of harm, of betrayal, of gaslighting. Ava had stood in court, laid bare her story, showed evidence of Noah's manipulation, of how he isolated her from her friends, controlled her movements, even monitored her phone calls. And yet, the court still deemed both parents equally fit to share custody. Women's rights groups saw this as a wake-up call. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern repeating across courtrooms everywhere, and Ava's case became the rallying cry. Within a week, public pressure forced a judicial review into how family court judges are trained on psychological abuse. Lawmakers began drafting what became known as Ava's Law, aimed at ensuring emotional and psychological abuse were taken as seriously as physical harm during custody hearings. Ava, meanwhile, didn't retreat. She began appearing on talk shows, podcasts, and webinars. Each time, she spoke not only about her personal experience, but also about the thousands of women who wouldn't be heard. "The court may have ruled," she told one interviewer, "but the people are speaking, and their voices are louder than a gavel." At her daughter's school, teachers and parents gave her quiet support. She noticed the way women looked at her with a mix of admiration and shared pain, as if saying, "We've been there too." Her story inspired art, music, and even a viral documentary short that chronicled her journey. The visual of Ava standing on the courtroom steps, face firm and eyes defiant, the courtroom atmosphere grew more intense as the second day of the trial commenced. News cameras swarmed the building, capturing every move. Protesters, louder and more numerous than the day before, surrounded the courthouse steps, holding signs that read, "Justice for all, not just the powerful, and equality in family law now." This case had clearly become much more than a private legal matter. It was now a cultural flashpoint. Inside the courtroom, Nora took the stand. For the first time, she shared the full depth of her experience. Her voice was steady, but there were moments when emotion broke through. She spoke about the emotional manipulation she had endured, the financial control, and the subtle tactics that kept her isolated. As Nora testified, the gallery remained silent. Even the judge seemed deeply moved. Across the courtroom, Andrew sat with clenched fists, occasionally whispering to his legal team. His expression alternated between anger and disbelief. The prosecution presented evidence of Andrew's financial strategies, offshore accounts, trust funds, and hidden investments. It became clear that while Nora had been living on a modest allowance, Andrew had amassed a fortune through secretive dealings. The defense, however, countered with their own narrative. They painted Nora as emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and unfit to be the primary guardian of their children. Their star witness, a former nanny, gave a damaging testimony that seemed rehearsed. But Rachel was prepared. She exposed the witness's connection to Andrew's sister, proving the testimony was biased. The jury watched the drama unfold with rapt attention. That evening, social media lit up again. Clips of Nora's testimony went viral. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities voiced support for her. Hashtags like #JusticeForNora and #Fix. The system began trending. The next day, Andrew's financial advisor was called to the stand. Under oath, he confirmed the existence of the hidden accounts and admitted he had been instructed to keep them secret during the marriage. The courtroom gasped. Andrew buried his face in his hands. The judge called for a recess, and Rachel approached Nora. "You're doing amazing. This is the turning point. Just hold on," she whispered. Outside, the media dubbed it the divorce trial of the decade. Nora had become a symbol for every person who had been silenced in courtrooms like this one. Her courage was changing minds and laws. Back inside, the trial continued with character witnesses who spoke to Nora's integrity and her devotion as a mother. Friends, former colleagues, and even a family therapist testified to her strength and resilience. Andrew, by contrast, refused to take the stand, advised by his attorneys. But that silence spoke volumes. The jury began to take notice. As the third week of the trial approached, the judge made an unusual request. Both parties were to submit a personal statement, unedited and in their own words, to be read aloud in court. Nora's statement was heartfelt. She didn't attack Andrew, but instead spoke about love, betrayal, and the need to be heard. She concluded with, "This isn't just about me. This is about changing a system that has hurt so many. When Andrew's statement was read, it focused mostly on his reputation and his desire to move on. It lacked empathy, and the jury felt it. At night, the protests continued. Outside the courthouse, hundreds gathered with candles, chanting for reform. Nora watched from her hotel room window, tears in her eyes. She turned to Rachel and said, "Whatever happens, we've already won something bigger." Rachel nodded. "We're not just fighting for a verdict, we're fighting for a new future." The trial was nearing its conclusion, but its impact had already begun rippling across the country. Legislators started referencing the case in debates. News anchors dedicated segments to analyzing its social implications, and people, ordinary people, Part 4. The courthouse was under tight security when the final hearing reconvened. Protesters lined the streets. Some held placards demanding justice for Eva. Others chanted slogans about judicial transparency and the rights of survivors. The media was there in full force, and across the country, millions tuned in to live coverage. Inside the courtroom, the air was tense. Eva sat beside her attorney, looking exhausted, yet composed. Across the room, Raymond and his high-profile legal team were calm, whispering among themselves. The judge entered, face unreadable. A hush fell over the room. After reviewing the evidence, testimonies, financial disclosures, and all other relevant factors, the judge began, "This court has reached a decision regarding the alimony, asset distribution, and custody arrangement in the case of Eva Lawrence and Raymond Kane." There was a pause, brief but heavy. The court awards primary custody to Mr. Kane. Alimony is waived. Asset division will follow the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. The silence was broken by gasps. Eva sat frozen, her eyes wide in disbelief. Her attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, while the other side exchanged subdued nods. Reporters dashed out of the courtroom, eager to break the verdict to the waiting public. The protests outside exploded into anger. The chants grew louder. Social media went into overdrive, with hashtags like #Justice for Eva and #Broken System trending worldwide. Influencers, legal experts, and ordinary citizens voiced disbelief. How could someone with documented evidence of manipulation, emotional abuse, and financial control lose custody and walk away with nothing? News outlets quickly pulled together timelines. They replayed key court moments, highlighted expert analysis, and dug into the judge's history. While the ruling was legally valid, many felt it ignored critical context. This wasn't just about law, it was about morality, perception, and precedent. Behind closed doors, Eva wept, not just for herself, but for the message the verdict might send to others in similar situations. She had fought courageously. Her story had reached millions. But in the end, the system hadn't changed. Not yet. Still, Eva refused to vanish quietly. In the weeks that followed, she appeared on national interviews. She spoke candidly about the psychological toll of the trial, the bias she faced, and the trauma of losing her children. But more than anything, she spoke about hope. "This is not the end," she said in a televised interview. "I will appeal. I will raise my voice for every woman who feels invisible in the eyes of the law." The backlash spurred legislative action. Lawmakers proposed bills focused on custody reform, mandatory financial transparency, and training programs for judges handling sensitive divorce cases. Protests turned into rallies for change. Organizations began offering legal support for women in similar battles. In a twist of fate, Eva's painful experience became a catalyst for nationwide dialogue. Raymond, on the other hand, saw his public image tarnished. Though the law sided with him, public opinion did not. Endorsements were pulled, business deals slowed, and online petitions called for boycotts of his ventures. Where once he had basked in public admiration, now there was a shadow over every move he made. Behind the headlines, the legal battle raged on. Eva's team filed an appeal, armed with new affidavits and expert witnesses. Supporters crowdfunded legal costs. Lawyers volunteered their services. Even some former acquaintances of Raymond came forward, willing to testify in the new proceedings. One day, in a video shared on social platforms, Eva sat in a sunlit room, holding a letter from a young woman who had watched her story. The letter read, "You gave me courage to leave my abusive marriage. I saw myself in you. Thank you." Tears welled in Eva's eyes. She looked into the camera and spoke, "That's why I won't stop. Because if my voice can help someone else find theirs, then it was all worth it." Months later, as the appeal hearing loomed, the nation once